Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's still Drakkenheim time. So, we've had a very eventful week and change for the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart Kickstarter campaign for a new campaign guide with a reinterpretation of the Any Award winning adventure into a Daggerheart form. If you don't know me, my name is Mike. I use they and he pronouns, and I am lead designer on this project working with the Dungeon Dudes in a partnership with them, Ghostfire Gaming, and Darrington Press to be published by Ghostfire. I'm really excited and delighted by the strength and positivity of the response so far to the project. And last week I talked about the campaign frame that is a beta frame that will help you kind of get started playing in Drakkenheim as a bit of a preview, or like a, we might think of it as like a mission statement or proof of concept of this is what Daggerheart and Drakkenheim could look like. And we're going to keep moving forward from that. The thing I want to make sure to say here is that what I'm doing today is mostly for demonstration purposes. There's no guarantee that any of these particular adversaries will end up in the book, and which adversaries do end up in the book is going to be a question of how many stretch goals are funded and what makes sense for the overall project, not necessarily which monsters Mike thinks are cool, even though I'm going to try to do some today that I think are pretty cool and I want to play with. So if you want more firm details, definitely refer back to the Kickstarter page itself, which is over at kickstarter.com/projects/dungeons-of-Drakkenheim-Daggerheart. I have done all of the reading things. So as you can see, we have our CGL language up again because I think we're going to be referring to the SRD, and because this is for demonstration purposes, I think it's just safer to do that as a good example. So we're going to keep this, and I've shown this, so now we're good to proceed. If you haven't already backed the project or taken a look at the page, you can get that beta campaign frame for free as a download from the page without having to back the project. I hope you will back the project, but you can get that preview before you decide whether you want to back it, and of course, see how I approach things here. There's been some other promotional media, right? The Dungeon Dudes did an AMA with Daggerheart lead designer Spencer Stark and Daggerheart additional designer / traditional critical role GM Matt Mercer last week, where they answered some questions, so there's more information there. If somehow I say something that contradicts what the Dungeon Dudes have said about this project, I defer to them because it's their world. With all that said, let's make some monsters. Okay, we're going to jump over here. Boom. And I'm going to show off a creepy monster design by pulling an image over from the Monsters of Drakkenheim book. I'm pulling from that book here specifically because those adversaries are more kind of richly detailed. Again, not a guarantee that we're going to do anything particular from that book. But what I wanted to show off is this big creepy jerk right here. Let's shrink down a little bit so that we can see more of all of them at once. This is the Hunter Hulk, which is a variant of the Haze Hulk type of adversary. Notable things here, right? We've got this big maw, we've got some tentacles, and then there's some other details about it. So I just want to give you a quick visual on that, and then I'm going to move it back over here, and we're going to talk statistics and turning this into a stat block. I am going to make my zoom bigger so that you all can see my text a little bit more readily. And then I'm going to move this down a bit here. Okay. And if I'm ever working and I've scrolled down and you can't see what I'm doing, please remind me, because I can get on a roll. So we have a Greater Earth Elemental stat block from the SRD that we pulled. I've already made a couple of changes and we'll keep changing it. But I am imagining this Hunter Hulk as a tier 3 bruiser. Right? Bruiser adversaries are designed to deal damage and take damage. I also think of bruisers as being adversaries that are good at disrupting and like moving adversaries around. And I realize, actually, this is not the thing. I had a different adversary I was going to do that was going to be a bruiser. This one I want to do as a skulk. Because the Hunter Hulk can turn invisible and then go and ambush mostly people, right? Because it's an aberration, a mutated creature of Drakkenheim. So let's do this one as a skulk, and then maybe we'll do another monster or adversary as a bruiser a little bit later on. So I am going to grab my SRD and let's see if we can get a tier 3 skulk to template off of instead. Okay. We are going to use the Demon of Despair, one of my favorite, an adversary from one of my favorite groups, the Emotion Demons, as I call them. I don't know that they're officially titled that anymore. So we're going to have this instead. So pieces of an adversary, right? We have their tier, their type, their name. We have a description. We have their motives and tactics. And then we have some more kind of firm mechanical elements. Looking back at the Hunter Hulk, some text about it says, a hunched and bloated form lurches out of the shadows. It has 2 massive tentacle arms that end in large talon-like hooks. The creature's head has 2 large octarine eyes, yet where a mouth should be there is only a fleshy surface. Instead, the creature has a massive snarling maw in its gut with jagged bone teeth and a large purple tongue. Right? Fun, substantial, evocative language here. For my description, I'm going to want to condense that for the ones that I'm building for the Daggerheart X Drakkenheim book, because adversary descriptions in core tend to be shorter than 2 to 3 sentences. It tends to be 1, maybe 2 sentences. So this is going to be some practice for condensing condensation for me, right? So let's say a bloated beast with 2 tentacle arms and a snarling maw in its stomach. It squeals hungrily as its arms flail toward you. This is a little bit more explicitly second person, right? Because it's toward you, like a specific target. I may back that off, but for this, the thing that I want to emphasize is that I'm trying to take a larger description and just boil it down a little bit more until it's actionable, right? I might tweak this instead and talk about the octarine eyes and yeah, something like that. But I think this will be okay for now. Next, we have motives and tactics. We know that turn invisible is a tactic. We know that endless hunger is one of its motives. And let's see, scoop up enemies, endless hunger, turn invisible. Let's say stalk prey for hours, because this is a thing that this adversary might actually do. It can't turn invisible, right? Then it tries to ambush you. But if it can't consume you immediately, it might turn invisible again and back off. That, for me, is a big part of why I'm interpreting this as a skulk type enemy, instead of a bruiser, because it's a variant of the Haze Hulk adversary type, which I would probably set as a bruiser. The trick there is that it is the template for other versions. So it could be a bruiser or it could be a standard type enemy, and then there are variants from it. In this case, we might have a skulk that is a variant of a bruiser. And so this adversary might be tougher than we might expect for other skulk adversaries. And this is all stuff that I'm going to be talking through. If I were not streaming, I would just be working through this in my head and comparing this adversary to other ones I was working on, benchmarking against adversaries from the SRD, and so on. I want to give a quick shout out to some folks who followed the channel in the last week. Mark Frew, DN Denial, as in like D&D Denial, and Josh versus Wall. Lovely names. Thanks to everybody who's following and supporting the channel. If you are watching on YouTube, I don't often do this, but I will encourage you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps appease the YouTube gods and such that their divine algorithms bring more people to see and hear the stuff that I'm talking about. So, plug done, we return to our motives and tactics. We've got Endless Hunger, Turn Invisible, Stalk Prey for Hours. Let's see. Bellymon, Visibility. Reel in Prey is going to be a tactic. A thing that I think I've talked about before on these streams, but I really want to emphasize when you're doing adversary design for Daggerheart in Homebrew or for Daggerheart compatible material to publish, do not overlook motives and tactics as a place to characterize adversaries, but also to provide inspiration to GMs who are using those adversaries, so that even if you don't have a bunch of things written out, right, you maybe only give them 3 or 4 features, those tactics and motives can be bonus moves. You might improvise a move that is Reel in Prey, but maybe I'll put it in as its own kind of thing. I will almost certainly put Turn Invisible in just to give more specific guidance to GMs instead of making them purely improvise that element of this adversary. Since these are tier 3, let's say that these are going to be difficulty 16 rather than difficulty 17. The benchmarks in the SRD are difficulty 11 for tier 1, difficulty 14 for tier 2, difficulty 17 for tier 3. So if they're 16, they're a little bit lower difficulty than average, but I'm probably going to give this adversary some experiences so that the GM can use fear and kind of emphasize certain aspects of their capabilities. Sorry, I'm getting like an annoying sound in my ear when I move because of interacting with things, so it's just kind of distracting. Yep. Let's just get rid of this because I think it's the hoodie. How are folks doing? It is getting cold where I am. If you've taken a look at the Drakkenheim campaign frame beta, are there any things that stood out to you? Are there questions that you have? If so, I may be able to answer them here. If they are stuff that we're kind of comfortable discussing, we being the whole team, including myself. So the squeaky sound is now gone. So that is great. Difficulty 16. Looking back at the SRD, our Demon of Despair has thresholds of 18 and 35, which are pretty good for this tier. Because the Hulk type enemies tend to be stronger, I am going to tentatively boost this severe threshold up to 38 from 35. I don't know that I want to boost this to 19, but I may come back to it. And then we look at hit points of 6, stress of 5. Because this adversary might disengage and then continue to pursue the adversaries, I'm going to bump up their HP just a little bit so that even if the player characters hit them twice with severe damage or 3 times with major damage, they'd still be able to cling to life and pursue the player characters maybe for one more good hit. Going from 6 to 7 means that when I do that mental math, it has to be, okay, you need to hit severe, major, major to down them, or severe, severe, light. I'm just shifting the range of number and types of hits necessary to down this adversary. Stress of 5 is a lot. We'll see if they end up needing this much stress based on the features that I end up giving them. Attack of +3 I think is pretty good. They do not have a miasma bolt. I'm going to say that they have hook tentacles, right? Talon like hooks, and those are going to be very close, right? They have a little bit more range than just a standard one-handed or even two-handed weapon. They're going to be able to reach out a bit more. If I wanted to really emphasize their reach, I might give that range of the lashing tendrils in the 5e block have a reach of 60 feet. So I'm going to change this to close, actually. Not all the way to far, which is about 60 feet, but close. I think extending this range to far could be a little much. The thing that would do is Left 4 Dead style. It would make this adversary much more like that type of adversary that hides and then grapples one of the survivors and pulls them up like to a rooftop or something. And that is pretty cool. So we'll keep an eye on this, whether maybe this Hulk is actually going to end up with a far range on this attack, or there's a specific action they could use that lets them attack at far, but then they're not doing so as a default. And maybe that's the way we split the difference. I think this damage is going to be a little higher than 3d6 + 1. I'm going to take a look over at these default attacks. Let's go 3d6 + 3. At tier 3, damage thresholds have grown pretty well. This damage here averages out to 3 + 4 + 3, so that's 7, 11, 14 damage, which might be major for some characters. So this is a little bit on the low end. What that tells me then is I'm probably going to want a special belly maw attack that's going to do a lot more damage, so that the hooks themselves are not as much of the threat as the hooks will then grab you, right? So this is I'm gonna jump all the way down to a reaction here. Reel them in. When the Hunter Hulk makes a successful attack against a PC, they must make a finesse reaction roll or be pulled a close distance toward the hunter and become restrained until they succeed on a strength or finesse roll, or the Hulk takes severe damage. So this is a grapple type effect, right? Restrained means that you can't move. You can be moved, but you have to do something to be able to get away and continue moving. So this is that Hunter Hulk lashes out with one of these hook tentacles, gashes you, but also wraps you up and pulls you toward it. But if you make a finesse reaction roll and succeed, it doesn't actually wrap you up and pull you. Here I want to emphasize finesse, because across a full range of adversary features, when they call for reaction rolls, I don't want to prioritize just one or two traits. I want my reaction rolls where I can to cover a broad range of all 6 of these traits so that we don't end up with basically a killer stat or killer app stat where it's like, oh yeah, well, everybody knows that you need to have a high insert name of this trait for Drakkenheim. Something I found in the original Dungeons of Drakkenheim that is fine and actually makes a lot of sense because of the rest of the 5e meta for me, and this is just my opinion. Constitution was the main trait, the main stat used to try to resist contamination in the 5e version. And so when making a Drakkenheim character, people tended to have Constitution be maybe their 2nd or 3rd highest stat, where otherwise they might have it be their 4th or 5th highest stat. I don't know that that's especially a problem, but thinking ahead for the overall adventure guide, I'm going to try and keep this in mind. This could easily be a strength reaction roll instead, right? It's about avoiding the pulling part more than the getting wrapped up part. But I think the Hunter Hulk is supposed to be so powerful that the thing that is more in question to me is, can you slip out of its grasp rather than can you hold your ground against this hulking beast that is trying to yank you toward it? Even a really strong character, I think, gets yanked. But a nimble, precise character with good finesse might be able to slip out of the kind of wrapping tentacles, even if they're taking this damage. So that's why I have this built in this way. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, Pathfinder PhD. No worries if you need to lurk. So we have this one feature set already. Now let's jump back up because we haven't set our... Yeah, so Not a Hag asked a question. Why is this a reaction and not an action? What's the difference? So what I'm doing with Reel Them In is I am saying that whenever this Hulk uses the hook tentacles or other attacks, they can activate Reel Them In. So this Hulk is pretty consistently going to be trying to wrap player characters up and drag them close so that they can use the maw. And I emphasize that by setting this as a reaction instead of an action, because a reaction, and this is how I think about it, right? A reaction you're likely to use whenever it would apply. But this way I can have other action features without de-emphasizing the wrap them up and pull them in element. I might end up changing this to makes a successful hook tentacles attack so that a maw attack doesn't like restrain and drag somebody in, but a character would probably already be restrained if they're being dragged in that way. So this might go back and forth. Jumping back up here to our damage and experiences, right? Let's say right, I want just an experience that emphasizes that hunger is a driving element for this monster. Can I use hungry, right? So let's go hungry. They utilize their hungry experience to try to grab you and drag you in. How do I feel about that, right? This could be determined hunter, or we could have an experience that is light on their feet, and that would then be used for stealth or pursuit, right? It might be stalking +3, so that when they turn invisible and the character's like, okay, I know it's around here somewhere. I want to try and identify where the Hunter Hulk is, even though they're invisible. I might say, okay, yeah, you can make that's probably an instinct roll, but I'm going to spend a fear and highlight the Hunter Hulk's stalking experience. And it is conscious of the fact that you're looking for it, and it is going to be more difficult to find in this moment, right? That is what I'm keeping in mind in terms of experiences. Which moments or facets or types of interactions do I want to have like an extra lever to use for this adversary, where I can spend a fear and put my finger on the scales a little bit more for that adversary. 3 experiences for a tier 3 adversary is not unheard of. I am going to say that Determined Hunter and Stalking are probably a little redundant. So let's stick with Hungry and Stalking as our experiences for now. This is a Skulk type adversary. I think there's a good chance this adversary gets deployed on their own. And so I'm going to explore them having Relentless too. So Relentless is a somewhat common feature that allows an adversary to to take the spotlight more than once during a GM turn, as long as you spend fear for... Sorry, I'm trying to grab the text so I can just use the existing text instead of trying to recall it perfectly from my memory. Here we go here. This is from the Hydra, so it's passive X. The Hunter Hulk can be spotlighted twice. And we don't need that part about the heads. Spend fear as usual. What that means is that in a GM turn, I could have the Hunter Hulk hit a player character with the tentacles, reel them in, and potentially, if they're close enough, then bite them with the maw. I could do that, but I won't necessarily want to do that all the time, because having a character grappled and in position to be eaten is a great provocation and invitation for other player characters to try to leap in and protect their friend. And that type of setup or telegraphed move, for me, can do a lot in terms of creating a big emotional impact, right? It's if I show the character winding up before they throw the hit, it emphasizes how important that action is. So it can be a soft move put on top of a hard move, right? They attack you. That's a pretty hard move. They attack you and pull you toward them. Okay, that's pretty scary. But they don't instantly get to chomp on you with the mouth. That attack and pull turns into a setup for another hard move in the future. But if I don't give the player characters a chance to respond to that setup move, that softer move that is added to the attack and grapple, then I am collapsing the wind up and the strike without letting the player characters respond unless they have like really specific, almost reaction type features, right? I am your shield. A character could jump in and get wrapped up instead of another character. Or if they're pulled in toward the Hunter Hulk and then a Guardian or Seraph is nearby, they might jump in and kind of take the bite instead of the character that's wrapped up. I certainly still want to allow that, but what I'm considering is that even though this adversary has Relentless 2, they may not always do the 1-2, because I want to give those moments of suspense for the player characters to react to and to enhance the emotion of the scene for the players. So I want an action feature that represents the bite for sure, right? And this is going to be mark a stress to make an attack against a target within... should be within melee because it's got a big tongue. 6 of one, half dozen the other. Let's say within melee for now what that means is that if I end up having a thing where they do get to attack out to a far distance and then pull them, they're going to have to pull them again before they can be dragged in to be bitten, right? Because the thing the Hulk wants to do is pull people in and like fully eat them. So a gnashing bite, mark of stress. Having this be a mark of stress cost also sets a natural limiter on how often and how many times it's going to be used in total. And let's see. I'm just setting myself up for another feature I want this adversary to have, which is that become invisible thing. I think I want that as an action instead of a reaction, because a reaction could get really powerful, but we'll see. We don't need that one anymore. This can get bolded. It doesn't need to be passive twice. So gnashing bite, mark a stress to make an attack against a target within melee. If the target is restrained, so this attack gets advantage if the target is restrained. On a success, the target takes, and this is going to be a big hit, right? I'm thinking 3d12, possibly even 3d20 physical damage. And because this is like gnashing teeth, I think it should probably make the target mark a stress or mark an armor slot without any benefit, right? Kind of a shredding element. If I'm emphasizing the horror of being swallowed, maybe that should be stress. If the target takes at least major damage, they become swallowed. Right? So they bite you, and if they get a big enough bite, you are fully into the mouth. A swallowed target must mark a stress. Each time they take the spot, they take the spotlight and cannot clear, can clear swallowed by dealing severe damage to the Hunter Hulk, which is basically fighting your way out from inside. So we have two things that are severe damage, which makes me wonder, I want to double check. Is this good in that it is consistent? Or do I want to have there be a different trigger for you get out of the mouth versus you are no longer being wrapped up by the tongue? I'm going to add something down here. Because the description here is, well, I don't know, they have two hooks. May have up to 2 targets restrained in this way. Hello, Gethin Pierce. Good to see you. Yeah, I hope you enjoy the video when you get to it. Thanks for dropping by. So, right, one tentacle wraps somebody up. Another tentacle wraps somebody up. They're pulling them in. Okay, we can have 2. That I feel all right about. But what should let them burst out from the inside? Right? Is it only if they deal severe damage, or all swallowed targets clear swallowed if the Hunter Hulk takes severe damage? Right? It gets hit hard enough and goes I'm going to make a sound. So like turn your audio off if you don't want like a kind of a, well, imagine vomiting. How about that? Maybe that's easier than me making the sound. So here I am thinking in story beats. They hit you and wrap you up and pull you in. Uh-oh, I'm telegraphing a future threat as the maw is going nom 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 nom, right? Getting excited about eating somebody. It bites on you and it does well enough to swallow you. Okay, now we have a player character fully being digested by a monster. That's really bad. What are we going to do to get them out? So another option could be that a character cannot clear swallowed unless they deal severe damage to the Hunter Hulk, or if another character succeeds on a strength roll, right? Where they come up and they try to grab the foot or whatever and pull the character back out, where the character is not fully swallowed, but they're being eaten, right? The trick there is that I might change the name of the status to something like, I don't know, it could be gross and call it like masticated, right? They're being chewed on. Generally for statuses, I try to stick to one word if I can, and I try to be as straightforward and simple as I can, right? And so a status of being eaten is clear, but it's a little bit more to have to say. So that could be a place where I want to look at playtesting, right? If this ends up going into the playtest documents that are provided to backers, since we have on the campaign page some mention that backers are going to get a chance to look at materials along the way, right, and get to playtest. That is going to be administered by Ghostfire, so they will control. They'll be the ones setting the details there, and then I'll get the feedback, right, to discuss with the full Ghostfire and Dungeon Dudes team, and then in collaboration with Darrington. So let's keep going forward. These adversary drafts, when I do streams, are very much first drafts. I might do some revision on them, but I don't want to get too bogged down in it. Find a moment to discuss, and then maybe we move forward. So we've got Relentless, so we can do a combo. We have our Reel Them In. The big other thing that we should have is this Contaminated Cloak, right? This is Spend a Fear to make the Hunter Hulk invisible. While invisible, all rolls to attack or detect them are made with disadvantage. The Hunter Hulk clears invisible when it succeeds on an attack. Not a Hag asks, are the PCs being chewed out, digested when they are swallowed in fiction? Chewed or digested, right? So probably the clearer, the more straightforward thing is that they are being chewed on, and then you're pulling them out. The way this image, again, I'm going to show a gross monster. For me, this monster is not so big that, well, I guess how big are they? They are large. So D&D large is not so big that you could have a whole human in there that's too far away from where the mouth is. Theoretically, there's a stomach. I don't want to dwell on it too much. So maybe we do want to focus on being chewed, right? They're trying to pre-digest effectively. Hello, Dr. Funnut. Thanks for coming by. It's not a gross monster. It's a beautiful art piece. It's a great piece of art, but it's also gross to me. It's gross in a different way than I think the art is poorly done. I think it does a good job of doing what I take it to be trying to do, which is to be gross. So looking back here, and they become chewed, right? if the character is being chewed rather than being swallowed. The Hunter Hulk can only have one target being chewed at a time, right? The mouth is big, but it's one person big, not several people big. So if we look back here, one of the things that I want to try and do is figure out how to make sure that this feature does not become too convoluted. What I may do, if this becomes a candidate for inclusion in the manuscript, is I'm going to go and look at other features that are about like engulfing or swallowing a player character, especially things from the SRD, because past Daggerheart designers figured this out, possibly including me, but this is me as someone not working for Darrington thinking about stuff and then referring back to official work. Right, that's kind of the division there. So this feels a little involved. I'm not totally satisfied with it, so I'm going to flag it mentally as a thing that I want to go back and check on. So while invisible, they are hidden, and all rolls to attack or detect them are made at disadvantage. We have the status of hidden in Daggerheart. It's a core status in the book. And when a character becomes invisible, it makes sense that they become hidden, especially if it's magic invisibility concealment here, right? Like this contaminated cloak. This is me taking liberty with what actually happens. I think they just full on use magic and become invisible. I don't know that there's like a cloaking effect, right? They're not necessarily wrapped in this, but it's evocative and I like that. It may get tweaked, right? When we do approvals, something like that could get changed. Having this be spend a fear means that the Hulk can do it even if they are all of their stress has been exhausted. So we can have a fight, we can go back and forth, and if I feel like the Hunter Hulk would try to disengage and find a new chance to pursue the characters, then I'm going to use this contaminated cloak feature and back off and then create another dramatic moment later on. So the thing I want with that is I probably want some kind of feature that represents the Hunter Hulk is following you, or the Hunter Hulk has been following you and is going to choose this moment to make an attack. So I think this is going to be a reaction, because we have 2 actions and 1 passive. I could add something about a passive. 5 features is getting to the high end. This may end up being a skulk that kind of acts like a solo, and at which point 5 features is not too many probably, but I'm trying to be cognizant of how many of these I'm having and what that cognitive load ends up being. While invisible, the Hunter Hulk pursues the party from a far distance. This is a passive as I'm writing it right now, but let me keep going and then decide. At the end of a scene where the Hulk is invisible and still pursuing the PCs, they clear 1 HP and 1 stress. Let's see. Humans are pursuit predators, and so are these monsters. Which means that if you have the Hulk just kind of skulking around like Smeagol and following the PCs and waiting, it's going to recover some. And so it's going to be a little bit in better shape when it comes after them again. This is kind of mean. What I can do with this is I can tweak some things. I could say Pursuit Predator, I could turn part of this into a passive and then have a reaction that says at the end of a scene where the Hulk is invisible and still pursuing the PCs, spend a fear to make them clear to make the Hulk clear 1 HP and 1 stress. So that gives it a specific cost. It also means that I can do it kind of once per scene, which this version still has. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this could turn into 2 features. So let's say let's move this way. We don't need this to be bold. We're going to move this, but invisible is still a status. And then then we get mutated recovery. At the end of a scene where the Hulk is invisible and still pursuing pursuing the PCs, they clear 1 HP and 1 stress. But here I give this a cost. Have the Hunter Hulk clear 1 HP. I'm not going to say they here because that could be confusing, since the last characters that this feature discussed is the PCs. The Hulk is clearing HP and stress. So I'm probably going to change the wording to this. At the end of a scene where the Hunter Hulk is invisible and pursuing the PCs, spend a fear to have the Hulk clear 1 HP and 1 stress. I could even go spend 2 fear to do 2 and 2. I'll leave it here for now. That means that we have Relentless 2, Pursuit Predator, Gnashing Bite, Contaminated Cloak, Reel Them In, and Mutated Recovery. So that's 6 features, 2 passives, 2 actions, and 2 reactions. This adversary is definitely on the verge of qualifying for a solo type adversary. They might end up getting pushed in that direction, or I might pull them back, maybe bring down the thresholds a little bit, reduce that HP to make it less a whole scene of threat just from this one adversary. Stress of 5. Do I actually need 5 stress here? Mark a stress to make an attack with the bite. Chewed. This is fear. That's fear. I don't think they need 5. Let's go down to 4 here, because they do have a recovery feature, which is pretty rare in Daggerheart. But that means that they're going to make at most 4 bite attacks in a scene. I could add something that's like, if they make a character make a death move, they get to recover something. I don't know that I want that here. The trick is that they should have something, but it would probably mostly apply if they eat NPCs. And so I might come back around and think about what that looks like. Or in another world, and this may not, I would say the chances of this happening in the full book are maybe pretty low at this point. If I had a specific environment for this Hunter Hulk to go along with them, maybe the rules about people getting swallowed and that giving bonuses to the Hunter Hulk would go in the environment part instead of on the adversary themselves. We'll see. So that took a little bit longer than I was expecting, but we have a very scary, interesting Tier 3 Skulk adversary in the Hunter Hulk. what I want to do now is I want to see if we can, well, so I wanted to make some adversaries for the followers of the Falling Fire as a contrast and talk about, kind of characterizing adversaries that are humanoid and things like that. But I don't know. We could do a congregation as a horde. That might be interesting. You can see here that I listed a couple of other candidates. Are there any of these that especially stand out to folks if you're watching live that you'd like us to try and tackle in making another stat block in the next, let's say, half an hour or so, maybe a little bit faster than we did the previous one, right? I think a zealot or a congregation we could probably do in a half an hour, no problem. Garmyr is another one of the adversary types. In D&D 5e, they were represented by the Gnoll type of adversary, right? Gnoll. So, yeah, I have a vote for congregation. I think that there's something there because it's a different kind of horde, and if it's a congregation, right, that's enough people together that maybe they could do some cool magic. So we've got congregation, and we've got a vote for the Bloodhound. Bloodhound is 146. I'm just going to zip through the book to remind myself what these look like and then see if one of them stands out to me more. So the Garmyr Bloodhound is, I had thought it might be the standard adversary of the Garmyr type, but actually I think it probably should be expressed as a ranged adversary. So let's do the Bloodhound, and I'm going to challenge myself to try to do 2 of these in no more than another full hour. So we're going to pull this down here, and I'm going to push all of these down. And then we're going to have a tier 2 ranged adversary. So I'm going to jump over to my SRD and pull a comparable adversary. Okay, we've got a War Wizard is an option. Spectral Archer is probably a better option because the War Wizard is going to have more magic-y ranged elements, which is less what the Garmyr Bloodhound is about. So well, we'll see where we get after the Bloodhound. Thank you for your kindness. So Garmyr Bloodhound, I will show an image. This is not nearly as grotesque, but I just want to have this on screen a little bit to give you some context, right? So we've got kind of this is what Garmyr look like, right? They're kind of hyena people-ish, but they've got a big, nasty-looking longbow, and for me, this image is kind of emphasizing the fact that they have like a really strong sense of smell, right? Bloodhound. So this is a medium type creature in D&D terms. Garmyr, in the flavor text here, it says Drakkenheim was once home to packs of wild dogs. When the meteor fell, every creature was changed. It's still unclear if Garmyr are mutated dogs, humans transformed by the haze into snarling beasts, or a combination of both. So it's gesturing toward that these might be what happened to Drakkenheim's dogs. It's not for me in this stream to say one way or the other, but it's interesting inspiration. So we're going to have a tier 2 ranged adversary. Text-wise, we have a box that says, lurking behind the pack is a Garmyr wearing a tattered cloak and hood, leaving only its snarling snout exposed and its red eyes glowing from the dark shroud. Its aloof patience belies its predatory fury. It carries a wicked longbow strung with sinew, and its quiver bristles with thick, barbed arrows. So, great description. Good job, Monty and Kelly, and or whoever wrote this one in specific, because the Monsters of Drakkenheim book, I think, has some extra contributors, so I don't want to leave them out in case it's one of them who did it. So for description, let's say a bipedal canine in a tattered cloak, and a snarling snout, with a snarling snout, and red glowing eyes. And then I'm just going to straight up use the last sentence. Right? It carries a wicked longbow, so on and so forth. This is the advantage of a project like this. Right? Ghostfire already owns this text. We can just reuse it if it's the best thing to use, if this then ends up in the book itself. And I don't have to necessarily reimagine any of that specific text because there's material to draw from. There is a combat tactics section over here, so let's take a look at that. Garmyr Bloodhound prefers to stick to rooftops and vantage points, right? So strike from rooftops. From rooftops and vantage points. Move from place to place. Choose quarry and focus your attention on the target. They're often accompanied by other Garmyr, yes. If the target flees, the Bloodhound marks it as quarry and leads the hunt after it. Okay. It's got kind of a Hunter's Mark ability. Specifically, it can cast Hunter's Mark. If the Garmyr Bloodhound sees its allies losing, it flees before enemies can reach its vantage point. So, right, this is not an upfront, like an up close and personal kind of adversary. They try to stay at range. So let's say maintain distance. Pick. I want something that's like basically pick your targets and burn them down. Focus fire. And what is their, right? We've got tactics here, motives, right? The Garmyr, I think of just emphasizing the element of the hunt, right? And so continue the hunt, right? Pursue the hunt, finish the hunt. Right? The motivation is to hunt. Right? Effectively, they probably would eat people, but the thing I'm going to hunt and focus on is hunting. Difficulty 13 for a ranged adversary at tier 2 is fine. Thresholds 6 of 14 if we're using the spectral adversary comparison. I'm going to look at some other tier 2 elements because since these characters, the spectral archers are ghosts, they have resistance to physical damage, and because of that, they don't need to have thresholds that are as high to be a comparable threat. These adversaries are not going to have that resistance. So I might up their damage thresholds. Yeah, let's do 715 for now, and we'll see where that gets us. For a ranged adversary, I think I'm going to leave their hit points at 3 because they really don't want to be in the fight. Right? If you're able to get a hit off on one of these bloodhounds, it means you probably put yourself into a good position. And I can make sure that that is true by giving them a feature that lets them respond, right? I think I might dip into one of these other adversaries from, let's see, tier 1 or tier 2. I'm thinking of the Harrier. They must be tier 1. Here we go. Where'd you go? Harrier. Did they end up named something else? Oh, because I'm not actually using Control F in that document. They are tier 1. Okay. So I'm going to grab these features from the Harrier, and I'm just going to give them to this Garmyr. So that is maintain distance. After making a standard attack, the Harrier can move anywhere within far range and fall back. When the creature moves into melee to make an attack, maybe this should be against this adversary, but anyway, they can move and then make an attack. So what I'm going to say is can move anywhere within close range. We'll limit that a little bit more. And then whenever into melee range, well, I guess, right, because it's melee range with the Bloodhound. I'll add with the Bloodhound, just to be really clear. They can, well, just let's say mark a stress, right? This is on them. If this goes into the book, we will have a style guide pass that will double check the wording on all this, right? Anywhere within close range and make an attack against that creature. On a success, you deal 1d10 plus 2 physical damage. So we're starting here. We may end up adding something else like that kind of Hunter's Mark-esque element where we might go and look at the Ranger features and then see if there's a adversary version that we could make. Attack plus 3, longbow, far, 2d10 plus 2. Experiences of ancient knowledge. Ancient knowledge they certainly don't have, right? That's a spectral archer thing. So this is scent prey, right? Emphasize their sense of smell. And these are going to be plus 2 experiences because this is a tier 2 adversary, and they're only going to have 2 of them. We might even go down to 1, depending. This adversary has 2 features, a passive and a reaction. We may want to add an action. So we could add effectively the mark type thing as an action, or it could be a reaction. And the question here is, how fast do I want this to be? Last night I was running a game where in the Witherwild, and I used the Mortal Hunter adversary. They have a feature where they put a deathlock on a character, which is like a mark. But that is an action that they take. And so that makes that process a little bit slower. Versus if I had a feature that said, when the Bloodhound makes a successful attack, and it might be like mark a stress to designate them as their quarry. And then there's some special thing about being the quarry. So I think I like that. So this is going to be select quarry. Could be something like size up quarry or designate quarry, but we'll just keep going. When the Bloodhound makes a successful attack, mark a stress. Let's spend a fear to make them hounded. When Bloodhound, when any Garmyr succeeds on an attack against a hounded target, and this is a key difference, and it turns the Garmyr Bloodhound into a huge contributor to an overall Garmyr hunting party. If the Bloodhounds are selecting the targets and then everybody is falling upon them, that becomes really scary. And what I can do there is, with a set of adversaries that work together, I can train a group of PCs to understand that when the Bloodhound designates somebody as the quarry, the group really has to make sure to act in such a way to protect that character because they're really at risk. How are we going to make that happen? this probably has to turn into a passive. Right, so it's the Garmyr Bloodhound that generates this feature. It is them as the Bloodhound that coordinates the group to do this nasty stuff against a hounded target. So if you get rid of the Bloodhound, that mark effectively disappears. The Bloodhound may only have one target hounded. Let's see. The Bloodhound always knows the direction of a hounded target. Right? That's just a clause. It's like the Ranger focus. And when a Garmyr succeeds on an attack against a hounded target, they deal 1d10 additional damage. 1d10 extra damage at tier 2 is meaningful. It's not game breaking. If I wanted to make this much nastier, I could say that the damage is direct damage instead. I could say that the Garmyr Bloodhound adds their 2d10 plus 2 damage to that total. As is, it's kind of like the Garmyr Bloodhound is getting a free shot on them as well, because it is a d10 of damage, and the Garmyr Bloodhound's damage pool is in d10s. So, right, it feels like the same there. Because it's all Garmyr, I might leave this at 1d10 for now. This is probably the kind of thing that I would want to playtest and see how scary it is in practice. At tier 2, right, that's levels 2 through 4, if characters are using like bare bones, they're going to have pretty strong thresholds, but then they're using a domain ability to be able to be tougher and handle these tougher hits. Being able to take stuff like the bonus damage from these Garmyr hunters is part of why people take those features. And so I want to, instead of shying away from that, I want to make sure that I have features and moves that will let those characters who've made those choices shine through the picks that they've made. It's like, you know what? Yeah, you did 23 damage to me. That's not severe. Like, oh, wow, that's severe to anybody else. I'm pretty sure 23 is the thing that it can be fine at tier 2, but if I'm wrong, that's because I pulled it out of my head. Okay. So we have 2 passives and 2 reactions. What we don't have is an action. And we already have 4 features. So, well, I wonder, what if we drop maintain distance, but we let them still have fallback? So now we have a passive and 2 reactions, and we can do 1 action. We don't have this other action because we decided to make select quarry faster, effectively by being a reaction. Just a second here. Okay, so looking back at the stat block, I see that the Bloodhound has pack tactics, right? They get advantage on an attack roll against if the creature has basically any of their allies with them, and the ally doesn't have incapacitated. Skilled Hunter, they ignore cover. Kill Shot, Garmyr's ranged attacks deal extra damage to a bloodied creature. Bloodied is a status, unless they're using it differently, inherited from D&D 4th edition, which means you're at half hit points or lower. We already have pack hunters here, so I don't want to necessarily add pack tactics because it's a little bit, it's 2 features with almost the same name or too similar of a name. But let's say Kill Shot. Action. This is going to be a Mark of Stress ability. Because that way, if they're trying to do a kill shot, they have 1 fewer of that resource to be able to do fall back. Because if the Garmyr can continually fall back forever, that's just going to be annoying. So there is some picking and choosing being done by having two features that require marking a stress. I could turn this into a spend a fear feature, and that might still be fine because this adversary only has 3 stress, and player characters do often have things that can deal stress to targets. So because it's scary, I'm going to change this to spend a fear and make an attack against a target with at least half of their HP marked. As the GM, I feel fine about this because half of your HP marked should have some manifestation in the fiction. And so if I as the GM say, hey, how many hit points do you have marked and how many do you have total? Okay. And then the Garmyr does the kill shot, right? They're looking for weak prey. I think that there are tier 1 ranged adversaries that have things not super unlike this. They have places where, oh, this ranged attack is now going to do double damage instead. I think it's like the skeleton archer that has a double, and then there's should be one for the jagged knife bandits as well. But that gives us 1 passive, 2 reactions, and an action. Notably, we want to think about the interaction of pack hunters here. If a target is hounded and then you do a kill shot, you add the d10 and you double that damage. Is that too much? I don't know. We'll have to find out. The nice thing about how Daggerheart's damage scaling works is if you do end up with an aberrant damage spike, damage threshold scaling means that it's still only going to do 3 hit points, or 4 hit points if you're using the massive damage optional rule. So I think that is going to be fine for the Garmyr Bloodhound. So that is a tier 2 ranged adversary, this scary looking jerk here with the big bow. Because these Monsters of Drakkenheim stat blocks are really comprehensive, what we're ending up with in Daggerheart is actually pretty small in comparison, because we don't get as granular in some areas as 5e does. That has pluses and minuses, right? There's flexibility, but there's also less specificity. And when I'm doing these kind of example adversary builds, I'm going to try to not get too complicated with things, right? There's pack tactics and skilled hunter and kill shot that are all traits, and then they have several different attack types and some other things. In 5e, that is a robust adversary with a number of features that gives them a bunch of different, gives them utility and flexibility. Daggerheart just works different. I don't know that one is necessarily a better approach than the other for the thing they're trying to do. But that said, let's take a quick look at the congregation and see if something comes out, like jumps out at me as just a really quick, easy-ish way of doing things. 340. Where's my congregation? Oh, it's on the other page. Okay, so a congregation. Gargantuan swarm of medium humanoids, right? When you destroy the horde, when you destroy the swarm, you leave behind some pilgrims. They are a mob, so they can occupy space. They have multi-attack, torches, pitchforks, trample. So what the congregation doesn't have is they don't have supernaturally stuff here. And I wonder if I want to change that in a Daggerheart presentation. I think it could be that we end up with multiple congregation stat blocks. This is unlikely because I might want to make a Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart book that has over 120 stat blocks in it, but that may be unrealistic in terms of budgeting, page count, and so on and so forth. So what I want is not necessarily what is going to end up in the book, because there are constraints, there are considerations, and there are limitations also in time. I can't just happily type away in my little monster lab for 6 months without doing anything else. But that said, the thing that would interest me about a congregation horde type adversary in Daggerheart is, oh, well, what can they do together, right? Their collective faith, what can that accomplish? If they are supposed to be pilgrims, but who are also tapping into the sacred energies, I would want a balance of these are just people, and so they might break. And when they work together, they have these incredible, they can tap into this greater power. And so that might look like giving them a really cool, powerful action, but then having a reaction that says, when the congregation marks, and then basically I'm looking at half their HP, it breaks apart, right? It doesn't go from horde, do big damage, to at half of their marked hit points or more, they do less damage. It could be when they've marked half their HP, they actually disperse, right? And I do dispersal, and it becomes, they turn into X many pilgrims or whatever. That kind of necessitates a pilgrim stat block. Or I just say the congregation dissipates, turning into individual civilians. And then I might say with, difficulty 10 and 1 hit point, right? Where, on their own, they just go down, no problem, very quickly. Only as a group together are they stronger in this way, where they require their own normal stat block. The thing I would want in a congregation stat block, as I'm seeing them here, is emphasizing that fragility, but that together they can accomplish something truly amazing, right? Because I want to validate the fact that in this setting, the followers of the Falling Fire are tapping into something real, even if people disagree with like the prophecies and the ideology and things like that, right? Literally real magic in this setting. So I'm going to scroll us back up here to the Hunter Hulk. I'm going to come back to me. And Junkrabbit says, I like that they're more flexible. When you look at something like the Stormlight games, blocks can get insane. Yeah, I've not taken a really deep look at Stormlight. It is going for a different approach than Daggerheart, for sure, based on other stuff that I've seen. And I know that different people like different degrees of granularity in some of these things. For some people, the level of granularity that Daggerheart has is just way too much, right? Too many things to keep track of. They want a really, really boiled down description of what an adversary is like. For other people, Daggerheart's not granular or specific enough. And so there's no one right answer for everybody. It's a question of what is the game trying to do, how does it do it, and how well does that fit your playstyle. Alan Tucker snuck in here while I was probably talking about something else. Having too many features or abilities can be overwhelming for a GM. Absolutely. It's a thing I try to keep in mind. It's so fun to write features that it's easy to end up with too many, where if you have 3 adversaries that have 5 features each, that's 15 features to keep in mind. Decent chance that that could be overwhelming. So when writing features, right, I try to be thoughtful about what are the small handful of moves or qualities that I want to emphasize for this adversary so that they are maximally usable without being overwhelming. So there is that. I am going to refresh the Kickstarter link here to remind folks that they can go and back the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart Kickstarter right now. It is currently at $285,707, and in just under $15,000, when the campaign hits $300,000, fingers crossed, there will be more adversaries. So if you have heard me saying, I may not be able to do all these adversaries, and you want there to be the money for Mike to, for me to be able to design monsters to my heart's content, support this campaign, back it if you haven't already. I know that times are tough for a lot of people, right? Economy in the US, not the best, a bunch of things going on. But if you are in a position to be able to back a campaign like this, I would ask that you give it a thought and decide if you want to go ahead and do that. I missed Not a Hag contributing to the Cult's Totem. So this is where I'm going to acknowledge that and raise my glass and drink. I have been thinking about what the next sharing spotlight should be, and I have some thoughts. This is not a promise, but I was wondering if it might be cool to do a sharing spotlight specifically about other Daggerheart related projects. That is, projects on Kickstarter, projects that recently came out, like Incredible Creatures, and maybe forthcoming crowdfunding campaigns where, while there is this big surge of excitement around Daggerheart and Daggerheart X Drakkenheim specifically, I can then maybe share some of that spotlight out to some other projects in the broader space. If you think that would be cool, please let me know, whether that's live in chat now or commenting on YouTube, and I will keep that in mind. Otherwise, I would probably pick another individual RPG that I think folks who are interested in Daggerheart might want to take a look at in terms of approaching things differently, or a cool different take on a genre, or it's just games that I think are fun and interesting. Choir of Menoth. I'm not familiar with this, so I'm gonna Google this really quick. Oh, it's from the Iron Kingdoms games. Yeah, I played the mech scale version of that, the first edition, 20-something years ago now at this point. So good recommendation, GH Leo. Thanks for swinging by. Okay, that's going to be it. We are going to be at PAX Unplugged next week. I may still do a stream next Wednesday, or I might need to spend my time resting and or packing. So I will put up, I'll put a note on my Patreon, like a public post next week, no later than Tuesday, to let folks know whether there will be a stream or whether I'm going to take that week off and save my energy for PAX Unplugged itself. PAX Unplugged is going to be very busy. There is the big Daggerheart Showcase panel that Darrington Press is doing. I'm very excited to hear and see what is going to be announced. Then the Dungeon Dudes are doing Escape from Drakkenheim, a one-shot Daggerheart Drakkenheim actual play. That's going to be on Sunday. And then Darrington Press designers and my lovely colleagues, who I like quite a lot, Spencer Stark and Rowan Hall, are going to be doing a world-building panel, I believe, on Friday that I'm hoping to catch. And then there's a bunch of people that I'm hoping to get to see across the con, other folks who are designers, actual play creators, fans and players, other folks who are staff at different publishers, and I'm going to do everything I can to not get sick. So thank you, Alan, for the take care of yourself. I definitely don't want to get sick again because I have so much to do, right? I have more Drakkenheim to make / reinterpret. So I'm excited about that. The campaign is going great. Thanks for hanging out with me. And now we are going to say farewell. Where is my ending? Here we go.